want to welcome everybody this morning to the special called meeting of the Temple City Council for August 13th, 2021. It's currently 8:35 a.m. If you would please rise as Mayor Mayor Pro Tem Judy Morales gives the invocation, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Jan Llewellyn.
Pray with me, please. Father, this is such a beautiful day, and we want to thank you. We want to thank you for allowing us to be here in the country and for us being able to work in our community and to serve our community. We ask that you give us strength to continue to work to improve our city, and that whatever we do, Father, is pleasing to you. And in your name, continue to bless and protect our leaders, Father, both nationally and locally, our mayor, our city council members, our city staff, and all those who work tirelessly to serve and to protect our city and our country. We ask you, Father, to continue to allow your love to show through us, and that whatever we do is to make our community a better place for each of our residents and all those who live in our area. Help us to love them, and help us not to judge or condemn them, but rather to come alongside them and to support and give them all your love, Father. We continue to pray for our country's safety, and we ask that you bless all our first responders, our doctors, our nurses, and all healthcare workers, our policemen, our firemen, and all those who are those who are suffering with the COVID-19 illness and all other illnesses. Father, keep them safe. Thank you for the vaccine that may help and keep the spread of the virus and save many lives. We thank you for all your source of wisdom, and we ask that you bring that to us today. Show us your will during this time and in history in our nation. Keep us safe, Father, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies. We'll now move on to public comment. Citizens who wish to address the council on any matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Also, no discussion or final action will be taken by the city council. There being no public comments, I will close the public comments and move on to the budget items. Item 3 reads, it's a public hearing to conduct a public hearing regarding the city's budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2021 and ending September 30th, 2022, and to consider adopting a resolution. Item A reads, adopting the city's budget for fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2021 and ending September 30th, 2022, including the operating budget for the 2021-2022 business plan, capital improvement plan, general government pay plan, fiscal and budgetary policy, and investment policy. And item B is to ratify the property tax increase reflected in the budget. This budget will raise more total property taxes than last year by an amount of $3,067,556, which is an increase of 8.84% from last year's budget. The property tax revenue to be raised from the new property tax added to the tax rolls this year is $1,257,535. Ms. Myers.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the culmination of a long process that we've been through together. And so I know you have seen this presentation several times, so I'll go quickly. This is the third year that the city has presented the annual budget in the context of a multi-year business plan. So Ellen, you might have to help me advance. I'm not sure that this is working. Thank you. So our business plan contains 4 key parts. Its foundation is our strategic plan, which sets the vision and mission and goals for the organization. We also have our financial plan, our annual budget, and our capital plan as part of our overall business plan. So as I mentioned, the strategic plan sets out the vision of Temple, a place you'll love to call home, our mission of exceptional service without exception, our organizational values of commitment, innovation, integrity, accountability, and collaboration, and our 5 focus areas, including a new focus area proposed for this year, which is communication and collaboration. The strategic plan also includes the goals and initiatives that council has adopted to direct the work of our staff team and our organization. We have a total of 10 strategic goals that drive the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. 3 of those goals work to advance the focus area of high-performing organization. 2 of those goals align with our communication and collaboration focus area. 2 of the goals align with our places and spaces focus area, 2 with our smart growth area, and 1 with our public safety focus area. From there, we present a financial plan that takes all of the goals and initiatives that are listed within the strategic plan and identifies the resources that are necessary to carry out those goals and initiatives, along with the funding source that we've identified to be able to use to fund those programs and initiatives. From there, we have the annual budget for fiscal year 2022. The proposed budget totals just over $216 million for expenditures, which is presented for all funds, including the reinvestment zone number 1 fund, which, as council will recall, includes tax revenue from all of the participating taxing entities. Just a quick snapshot of some of the highlights that are presented for the proposed fiscal year 22 budget in all 5 of our focus areas. We do have new programs that are presented to help us further our progress in each of these 5 areas. And then finally, our capital program is also an important part of our business plan. As council knows, we have a very robust capital program. We're preparing for the growth of our community while continuing to invest in our current infrastructure to make sure that all parts of our community are strong and prepared for a vibrant future. Our current projects underway total almost $350 million in all sorts of different categories. We've got mobility, utility, lots going on within our reinvestment zone, as well as parks, drainage, facility, and equipment projects. Throughout the remainder of the business plan, we have an additional $407 million of capital projects proposed, also in the categories that you see on the screen. Notably, a new category for the future is our public safety, and that will involve our public safety training facility, as well as improvements to our animal shelter. That concludes my brief presentation. I do have all 250 slides if you would like to go into detail about something specific. Otherwise, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Council, any questions for Ms. Myers? Okay, at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this item may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record, or raise your hand on the virtual platform. Okay, there being none, then I will close the public hearing and I'll entertain a motion on item 3A. And council, you have special language at your seat.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the budget for fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021 and ending September 30, 22, including the operating budget for 2021-2022, business plan, capital improvement plan, general government pay plan, fiscal and budgetary policy, and investment policy be adopted.
Second that motion.
I have a motion by Councilmember Walker, and we have a second by Councilmember Long. Council, if you would please cast your vote.
Mr. Mayor, my vote is aye.
Thank you, sir. Item 3A passes 5 votes to 0. I'll now entertain a motion on item 3B.
Mayor, I'll make a motion on 3B. I move that the property tax increase reflected in the budget be approved. This budget will raise more than total raise more total property taxes in last year's budget by an amount of $3,067,556, which is an 8.84% increase from last year's budget. The property tax revenue to be raised from the new property will be added to the tax roll this year, $1,257,535.
Second it.
Have a motion by Councilmember Long. We have a second by Councilmember Walker. Council, if you would please cast your vote.
And again, Mr. Mayor, I vote aye.
Thank you. There it is. Very good. Item number 3B passes 5 votes to 0. Moving on to item 4 is a public hearing to receive comments. To conduct a public hearing to receive comments on the proposed tax rate of 64 cents per $100 valuation for fiscal year 2022, which is the 2021 tax year. Item number 5 is a second and final reading to consider adopting an ordinance approving the tax roll and authorizing calculation of the amount of tax that can be determined for all real and personal property in the city for fiscal year 2022, which also is the 2021 tax year. And item number 6, which is a second and final reading to consider adopting an ordinance setting a tax rate of 64 cents per $100 valuation comprised of 0.303 for maintenance and operations and 0.337 for debt service for fiscal year 2022, which again is the tax year of 2021, and making the appropriation for the regular operation of the city of Temple. Ms. Bernard.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. As Brian mentioned earlier, we're at the end of a long process of developing and the final adoption of the budget today on August 13th, special called meeting. As we go through this process of the budget and tax rate adoption, the process and timelines for required meeting dates, publication and notices, motion language, et cetera, is governed by the state law through truth in taxation and also requirements of the city charter. Again, Brian had just went over in item number 3A. There's 6 items that were approved in that item, and just wanted to highlight the fiscal and budgetary policy and investment policy, which is included with this item. There are no changes to that, but each year it's included in the adoption process. Looking at our proposed tax rate, we do, when we look at tax rates, we compare it to a lot of things. The proposed tax rate of 64 cents as compared to the no new revenue tax rate of 60.90 cents. And it's below the voter approval tax rate of 66.06 cents. Just the no new revenue tax rate is the total tax rate needed to raise the same amount of property tax revenue for the city from the same properties if you tax them in the same properties in both the 2020 tax year and 2021 tax year. And the voter approval rate is the highest rate that the city may adopt before voters are entitled to petition for election to limit the rate. For this, it would take it to the voter. You'd have to have the voters approve it before you could adopt that rate. The proposed tax rate is 2 components, M&O and INS. The M&O portion that is 30.3 cents. The debt or the interest and sinking rate proposed is 33.7 cents for the total of 64 cents, and that is 1.25 cents less than the tax rate last year. Looking at the proposed tax rate, what it would mean to a senior citizen, 65 or older homeowner, there would be no additional taxes because their taxes are frozen or capped. On a $100,000 home, no increase in value. It'd be a decrease of $1.04 a month or $12.50 a year. And then looking at what the appraisal district publishes as the average net taxable value of a home in Temple, and comparing it to last year, the value increased 6.52% average. It would be $3.39 a month or $40 a year. This is just the history of our tax rate, showing the components. And as we talk about our robust capital improvement plan, that plan has been able to be financed with minimizing the tax rate impact. Moving into the property tax roll and tax levy, the total taxable value for the city of Temple is $6,696,361,276, and that represents, including the reinvestment zone, an increase compared to the previous year's tax base of 9.13%. As you can see, the various components of that, you have the city of Temple, the frozen or freeze taxable, and then the tax increment district. Looking at the certified tax roll and calculation of the tax levy, the total levy for FY '22 is $755,601. And as on your previous motion language, it shows the total increase compared to the previous year's levy of $3,067,556. And of that amount, 1.2 million is from new properties, new value. Also included to support this budget, there is a solid waste rate increase to residential services of $1.05 per month, increasing the rate from $18.65 to $19.70. And then the commercial services, a 5.70% increase. And then to the water and wastewater, there's a 25-cent increase per 1,000 gallons for the volumetric rate of water, and the same for the sewer or wastewater. And I'd be happy to answer any questions related to that.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard. Council, any questions for Ms. Bernard? Okay, there being none, then I'll open the public hearing on item number 4. If you would like to comment, have any questions, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record, or raise your hand on the virtual platform. Most everybody in the audience had something to do with this budget, so I think y'all are very familiar. Nothing on the platform? All right, very good. Then at this time, council, I will entertain a motion on item number 4.
I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.6.
Sorry, Judy, my mistake. There's no action required on this item.
Oh.
All out of habit. So I will close the public hearing. No action is required. We'll move on to item number 5, but I will entertain a motion on item number 5.
No special, you can just, this
Yeah.
is for item number 6, so
Right,
you can just
I move that,
use standard motion language.
make a motion that it's approved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Judy Morales. We have a second by Councilmember Jessica Walker. Council, if you would please cast your vote.
Aye.
Item number 5 passes 5 votes to 0. And now I'll entertain a motion on item number 6, and you do have special motion language for item 6.
Here, I'll go ahead and I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.64, which is effectively a 5.9090% increase in the tax rate.
Second.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Judy Morales. We have a second by Councilmember Walker. Council, if you would please cast your vote.
Aye.
Item 6 passes 5 votes to 0. Congratulations, everyone, that the budget is in the books. As always, I want to thank staff for the constant hard work on this. You guys make it look easy to the council, but I know there's a lot more to it than that. So thank you for your constant efforts and oversight in everything that you do. As you know, as the mayor walking around talking to people, it's just invariably whenever I'm out in public, if someone stops me, they say, there's so many good things going on in Temple. And I meet with a group of mayors once a month, the regional mayors, and they always say, I don't know how you guys are doing the things that you're doing at the tax rate that you're doing it at. And we truly are, the city of Temple truly is the envy of the region. And there are a lot of things involved in that, but one of those is good, sound fiscal policy year after year. So, and that's not all. The council comes and goes. And so that's not all the council. We set the policy, but you guys execute it. So as always, thank you for the good work. Thank you for the sound management of the tax dollars. It's as the mayor and as a citizen, that's very much appreciated. So thank y'all.
Mayor, if I may, I would like to recognize the staff that makes that happen. They work very hard, and I think they're the smartest, brightest people in government finance. And I'm going to start with Jennifer Emerson on the end, Sherry Pogar, Erica Glover, Laura Ty, Robbie Schimmel, and then Melissa Probelski. Y'all do a great job, and we really appreciate it. They spend a lot of hours, and you don't leave a penny uncovered because it can roll into a dollar, make things real difficult down the road, but they do a great job and really appreciate what they do. Thank y'all.
Very much. Council, any thoughts?
Yes, Mayor, for all the staff, we see Tracy frequently. We don't see you all frequently, but just so you know, Tracy tells us how wonderful you are all the time, and we know it. We thank you very much.
Never misses a chance to sing your praises.
Right.
Up the good work, and we're all behind you. So thank you for your commitment.
All right. Again, thank y'all very much. Now we'll move on to the regular agenda, which is to receive item number 7 is to receive a briefing regarding the establishment of a community development program under Chapter 373 of the Local Government Code and the Community Development Local Government Corporation under Chapter 431 of the Texas Transportation Code. Ms. Myers.
We actually have 2 special guests today. Not really, but Erin is making a surprise early appearance for us. And so she's going to lead the presentation today for a proposed community development program. And I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I also have Kayla Landeros here today, so she will take on the second part of the presentation regarding a real estate local government corporation. So just a quick briefing, the Texas Community Development Act allows for urban communities such as Temple to expand economic opportunities for low and moderate income individuals by providing decent housing and a suitable living environment. And we do this through creating a community development program. The document that you all have today that we're going to be presenting on divides that focus into 3 areas: program goals, focus areas, and program activities. So the goals of the act are what you can see here on the screen, include several different factors, and such as blight elimination, residential and commercial development and redevelopment, economic development, infrastructure improvements, creating the sustainable housing for low and moderate income residents, improving the arrangement of residential, commercial, industrial, and recreational activities, as well as eliminating conditions that could be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare. So what we are required to do by the act is to create focus areas where we want to focus these efforts on. And so, as you all know, we have an effort where we call the Love Where You Live initiative, where we've identified 18 neighborhood planning districts. We have completed 6 to date. And so we focused our efforts on looking at those. So what you see in the map there are the boundaries of all the neighborhood planning districts. And then the hatched area over that is the overlay for the community development program, or I'm sorry, the CDBG low and moderate income areas. So we put that on there. So what we're proposing is that this will encompass all of our focus areas. that are included in the LMI overlay over the neighborhood plans. Just a couple little changes, though, as you can see with Jackson Park. LMI is the southern part of Jackson Park, and we're proposing all of Jackson Park be included within that area. Temple Heights, the area between Avenue M and Avenue R. And then for the T-Med district, we would like to, in addition to that, include the area south of Avenue M, east of 31st, and south of Avenue R. So there are several different program activities. What we did when we were creating this is that we looked at goals for the programs, and then we look at activities that will carry out the goals of this program. And so that includes the acquisition, disposition of real property, rehabilitation of privately owned property, assistance to private entities in order to promote economic development within these focus areas, any provision of public services that may not be available, grants to nonprofit organizations, code enforcement efforts, the clearance, demolition, and rehab of buildings, construction of public works that will further a goal to provide decent housing, relocation payments for individuals. So the community development program, what we've done then is we have divided this up into 4 main areas. And then there are activities that we have listed under these areas. And that includes residential development and redevelopment, economic development, land acquisition, disposition, and educational program and resource development. We'll go over that now. So the goal for the residential development and redevelopment area would be to encourage a mixture of residential, so we can ensure that we have those healthy and safe neighborhoods for low and moderate income individuals. A part of that, several actions that we're proposing to take into place is updating the Unified Development Code to allow for infill and redevelopment growth opportunities in those program areas. Also to create zoning standards that could allow for greater density of residential development. So allowing more array of housing over there. Working with nonprofit organizations to develop housing for low and moderate income families. Facilitating the creation of both affordable and market rate housing. Also proposing to pursue a memorandum of understanding with Bell County and other taxing entities related to tax foreclosed property. You may see that the city of Waco has something like this within Fleming County right now. And so when properties are proposed that to go into the tax sale, the city has the opportunity first to acquire those properties before they're placed out for auction. So that's something that we feel would be very helpful moving forward with this if we had that in place. We'd also like to adopt a residential grant program, which I'll go into detail a little bit later, and that's included in the appendix of this document. We're proposing to work with developers to pursue housing development that could qualify for low income housing tax credits. This is afforded by the state. The state receives funding from the federal government, and then they can provide these tax incentives to developers who provide this type of housing for low and moderate income individuals. And finally, design and construct infrastructure improvements that would support new residential development as well as infill development. For economic development, what we would like to do is adopt a commercial grant program. So that goes hand in hand with the residential grant program. And what we've done is, like you'll see in the appendix, and as I go through here, we've divided each of those areas up by the neighborhood planning district. Another opportunity could be to pursue economic development agreements with developers. That way we could promote commercial development. And then the city could convey property, provide cash grants, and participate in infrastructure improvements. And then also an opportunity to pursue tax abatement agreements with interested property owners and developers. So I'm going to go through the different grant programs right now. So Ferguson Park and Cresty are very similar, but you'll see, I'm just going to bring them all up so you can see them. So we've put those two and they have several different similarities. So divided it between, you'll see what we propose here is something similar to our strategic investment zone grant program, where we have a match and then a maximum grant that's allowed. So you can see that for the new residential or the new commercial, it's a lower match. It's 20% match compared to the existing development. It's a little bit more expensive, and we want to make sure that there is funding and efforts put into place to rehabilitate and put reinvestment into those existing properties. And so we're proposing a 50% match for those. And so as you can see, the way we put these together is that we've looked at each of these neighborhood plans and the recommendations that came out of these plans. And so the grant opportunities are very similar to what you see when we present those to you all. For the historic district, it's a little bit different. With those, not a lot of new development there. So was when we proposed the plan to you all and you adopted it, you'll see several different components as it relates to rehabilitation of existing residential structures, as well as adaptive reuse, where you have maybe an existing residential structure that you turn into a commercial property, but still making sure that you keep the look and feel of that historic home. So those are different areas that you see there. For central and midtown districts, again, very similar to one another. So we've tied those two in together and then separated it similarly like we did with Ferguson and Crestview by the infill new commercial and residential development with a 20% match in the residential redevelopment and commercial redevelopment with a 50% match. And then finally, we have the Bel Air district. So a total of 6 that you see here. And as we take these to you also downtown, the next district that you'll be proposed to consider adoption of is the downtown district. And then what we would do is once that's complete, we would add it to this program. So for the Bel Air district, some similarities with some differences. Several of the housing stock is in fairly good condition, but there are some opportunities for new residential development in the area that's has not been developed and it's still vacant right now. And then also for some commercial redevelopment opportunities along 3rd Street. So we are proposing some items there, as well as residential redevelopment and new neighborhood service development. So moving on to educational programming and resource development. What we have here is we would like to, as a part of this program, take an opportunity to educate both residents and developers and property owners of the program and the benefits that could be provided to them. Some actions that we can put in place to do so would be creating a webpage that's completely dedicated to the program and has all the information on there. Creating program activities on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, things like that. Also having a boot camp series for homeowners so they can understand a little bit more of the overall process and what's available to them. A developer boot camp series is also proposed. That could be some information on the overall development process that we have here in Temple. And then finally, a homeowner boot camp series that could provide some information on the benefits of home ownership. And now Kayla Landeris will talk to you about the real estate local government corporation.
Thanks, everybody. I was surprised how nervous I was this morning, like I've never stood up here before. But glad to be here and to work with Aaron and Bren and others on this proposal. And so just a little bit of background of how I've worked with Aaron over the past really couple of years now. I'm going to say 1 year because I don't count COVID year, but so when I left the city, you all were just getting started with the neighborhood planning districts, and which is an incredible program that I think is innovative from the city's perspective. And before I left, and in the few months after, we talked about, how you're going to create these program districts and identify their needs and what would help to redevelop and help them to thrive again. And but what's some other tools, right? What are the actual tools that we can put into place to make those things happen? And so the community development program was one of those tools that we identified a while ago. And there's actually 2 different programs in the local government code that are pretty similar, and we ultimately decided to go with the community development program. But that's really what it is. It's another tool in the toolbox to help stimulate and promote growth and redevelopment in the areas that you all have already identified as needing those things. And so what Aaron has gone through are, the different goals and activities of this community development program. And what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes is one of those, which is land acquisition and disposition. And so just some further context on that. I talked to you guys a lot about this when I was city attorney, but all the different ways that the city can either acquire property or dispose of it, right? We have all these kind of structures that the city has to work within on those two areas. So acquiring property is pretty easy. You can acquire it obviously from a willing seller, or you can use eminent domain. If generally the city's got to pay fair market value for the property, usually get an appraisal. You guys know all of that very well. Disposing of property, what we've talked about in the past, is a little more difficult, right? And you've got these different ways that you can do it. You can do it by a public bid process. You can list it with a broker, which is still a relatively new process that went to legislation a few years ago. But even that's a little cumbersome. You've got to list it for 30 days. You've got to take the highest offer. And so actually disposing of property is a little bit more difficult. That's odd to say in Temple, because Temple has actually been very successful in transferring property, mostly obviously for economic development purposes, right? And so Temple's done that very well and been successful at it. And the law allows the city to do that kind of under a little exception that we've always used in the local government code. That being primarily that the property that's being conveyed is in the reinvestment zone. So that's a very helpful kind of exception that the city has used. Where that doesn't work in the neighborhood planning districts is those areas are not in the reinvestment zone. So you're thinking of different ways to get property into the hands of people who will develop it in the right way and follow through with the city's goals. So what I'm going to talk about today is another way to perhaps do that. And it's the local government corporation is the name. It's a kind of a creature of statute, as the lawyers call it. And so, but it really is a nonprofit organization. It's a nonprofit organization that the city creates, and it can do a variety of things. And so what we're proposing is a local government corporation to focus on real estate. And I'll kind of go into that in more detail. So this is what I just talked about, the acquisition and disposition of property and what the city currently, kind of the boundaries that you all currently work within. So the local government corporation is found, oddly enough, in the Texas Transportation Code, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but that's where it is. But it is a short subchapter that says that Texas cities can form a public nonprofit organization to do any governmental purpose. That's actually the words that are used, any governmental purpose. And lawyers have interpreted that to mean just what it says, that local government corporations can be created by a city. It can actually be created by a group of governmental entities working together, but can be just created by one to do any number of things. And what we're proposing is the creation of an LGC to acquire, hold, and sell real estate for the city. And so in going through this process, we feel like the creation of a local government corporation to do that would help promote the goals of this community development program. It is an easier process to get land into the hands of people who will, again, develop it and redevelop it in accordance with the program goals and activities. So some examples of how other cities have used local government corporations. If you Google it, you'll get all kinds of different examples. Houston has, as far as I can tell, they have about 30 local government corporations doing a variety of things for the city. And so you can see at the bottom of this list, well, actually, we've got 3 Houston LGCs listed. You may have heard of Houston First Corporation, which is actually an LGC. That entity operates city-owned facilities such as the Convention Center, the George R. Brown Convention Center, the buildings in the theater district. And so they do a variety of things. Houston has an LGC that they use very similar to what we're proposing to hold land and acquire land for new public parks and open spaces, and to create affordable housing neighborhoods in the Houston area. We've got a couple of other examples on there. Other cities have used them more for just kind of solely economic development purposes. So Dallas created one to build, own, and operate the Omni Hotel in the Dallas Convention Center. Bryan College Station has a couple, and our law firm has helped with these over the years. They have one, Bryan College Station, the two cities jointly own and operate their landfill and recycling operations in that area. And so they created an LGC to own and operate that facility. And then I don't have it listed here, but Bryan Commerce and Development is more of an economic development LGC that the city of Bryan created several years ago. That entity has been very instrumental in the development of the Traditions area. If you've been to the golf course and the residential areas around Traditions, the Bryan Commerce and Development over the years has partnered with a couple of different developers to get that done, and done some really innovative things in getting that area redeveloped or developed. So those are just some examples. Kind of how is it done? The process of creating it is pretty straightforward. You have to name it. It is a nonprofit organization, so you have to pick a name. What the example you see on the screen is Temple Community Development Corporation. It can be anything that the city determines is fit for this purpose. You do have to, of course, get the Secretary of State to approve the name. You all have to approve the name. You have to adopt the formation documents. So that's your certificate of formation, which is the document that forms any type of corporation in Texas. So that's pretty straightforward. We'll have to come up with bylaws. So your bylaws is going to say who's on the board, how long do they serve, a general statement of the purpose of the LGC. If the city wants to place any restrictions on the entity, you can do that through the bylaws as well. You can, there's things like holding your preliminary organizational meeting and all of those kind of things that you got to check off the list. Property held by the LGC is exempt from ad valorem taxes. The LGC is exempt from sales tax. You do have to go through a little bit extra step to get that, but you still get those exemptions with the local government corporation as well. So you will have to appoint a board of directors. Your board of directors can be the council. It can be council and staff. It can be a mix of outside citizens and council. You have a lot of flexibility there on how you put together the board of directors. It can be any number. Of course, you decide the length of term, any removal processes. As far as whether they have to be citizens of the city, the statute just says that a majority of the board members have to be citizens of the city or residents of the city. So those are your kind of your boundaries on how you can create and set up the board. As far as contracting, so a local government corporation doesn't actually have to follow those kind of same requirements that the city does. So that can be contracting for goods and services. There's a more flexibility from a purchasing perspective that an LGC has. And then, of course, what we were really focused on is real estate. So, acquiring real estate, again, from the city's perspective is not hard, but as you dispose of real estate or want to convey real estate, you've got more kind of restrictions in place. And so conveying real estate over to an LGC to use in a way that promotes the goals of the community development program, working with developers who might be interested, working with property owners in the area that might be interested. The LGC can do that and not, there's no public bid requirements, there's no listing with a broker requirements. There's more flexibility on the price that you sell property for. But you can still put in all of those, think about our typical economic development agreement where we say, we're going to transfer this property over to you, but you've got to make this capital investment by this date. You can still have those types of restrictions in your conveyance of property, even if the LGC is the entity that's doing it. If the LGC is selling property there, it's raising funds. At some point, it could issue revenue bonds. It's not considered city debt. And LGCs are nonprofit corporations. They can fundraise like a nonprofit corporation as well. And so if you've got a really cool entity that is trying to promote redevelopment and development in our core neighborhoods of the city, I think that's a cool goal that the city can promote as well. Let's see, one thing that I think it was on one of the slides and I missed it. The LGC is a separate entity from the city. So the city is not liable for the actions of the LGC, and the board members of the LGC there, they are board members of a nonprofit entity, so they're protected from personal liability unless they just go out and do something really crazy. And so, but I've kind of gone through everything on this slide, but how does the LGC benefit the community development program? We've talked about, we feel like it's a good tool to use to help with acquiring properties and getting properties into the hands of people who are going to promote the overall goals of the community development program and get them developed and redeveloped in ways that meets the city's goals. And I think that it gives the city the opportunity to not just be kind of the regulatory authority. You're not just checking zoning, you're not just checking plating on these properties, but you're kind of getting into that development game in these core neighborhoods and having a little bit bigger role in how they get developed and when they get developed, and incentivizing those things as well. So let's see. Oh, one thing that Aaron and I've talked about a lot, and I hope you guys all remember me talking about this when I was city attorney, although it was years ago. But when I came here in 2012 with Jonathan, this was already on the radar as something that the city kind of needed to tackle, and that's the surplus property. So you all know the city's got, you own these like crazy tracts of land everywhere. And they're tiny, and some of them just need to be conveyed to neighboring property owners, but some of them can really, could be developed into something more. And so when I was here, we worked with Alan's department in mapping, and they put together this really cool map of all of those properties and identified them. And so it's like I can't let it go. It's like trying to kind of pick up that process again and help get these properties back on the tax roll. Aaron and I feel like the community development program and the local government corporation could help with that process. If you can convey properties over to the LGC, you are not working within those same structures that the city has to. It's going to be easier to convey to neighboring property owners or to potential developers. And so we also see, I think, the LGC as being helpful in that process. And so one that Aaron mentioned Waco earlier, but Waco also has a pretty cool program for their surplus property. They don't have a local government corporation. They do this with city staff. But if we could get to a point where they've got a good website that has pictures of all their properties and what they're trying to sell them for. And I think that's something that the LGC could get to as well. So I'll kind of sum up the presentation. Just the community development program, the document that you have in the agenda goes through the program goals, the focus areas, and the activities. And then we've broken down those activities into the 4 activities that Aaron talked about. And so the next steps would be to adopt the program. So local government code has certain steps that you have to go through to adopt the program. The first one is to hold a public hearing. And so the action item that you have on the agenda today is to approve a resolution setting that public hearing for next week on the 19th. So hold a public hearing on the community development program. And then that has to be done by ordinance. And so you'll have 2 readings of an ordinance to create the program. And at the second reading of the ordinance, we're proposing a separate item to create the local government corporation. So that will be a separate resolution. After the LGC is created, it'll be working with staff to identify properties that can be transferred to the LGC and to start kind of testing the waters of what the LGC could do to get these properties back on the tax rolls and hopefully developed or redeveloped. So that's the schedule that Aaron and I have put together, our proposed schedule for those steps. So you would have the second reading of the community development program and the creation of the local government corporation on September 16th.
I'm happy to have a quick question. When you showed the neighborhood overlay with the hatched area, that would be the LGC, just the hatched area?
So yeah, that's a great question. It could be, you could create the LGC to, and the documents to say, you know, we're just focused on real estate in this area. If you wanted to make it broader, you can do that too. Bryan Commerce and Development, I can show you guys their bylaws and their corporation documents say, you know, we're creating this entity to focus on development and redevelopment on a broader scale in the city. So if you wanted to keep it broad, you can do that, but you could also make it very specific to those program areas.
Okay, so you wouldn't have to have another LGC if you wanted to change it. You could.
Exactly. So that might be a benefit to keeping it broad for now. That way, if you've got kind of the one-offs that are outside of those program areas, you already have a vehicle to help with that.
That is what I would recommend, because while the primary focus for us is our community development, our neighborhood revitalization areas, I have probably, I could name 3 different examples of just properties that are outside of those boundaries that we are challenged to get back to, you know, a useful purpose. One example that I'll bring up is the property that we purchased for our project with Temple ISD to rebuild Jack White. The remainder property could be used for commercial development, and that is what our plan is, but that property is outside of the reinvestment zone. So to be able to transfer it to a potential developer to invest there, we would need to use something like the local government corporation, or we just have to put it on the market and accept the highest bid, which may not net you the capital investment and the job creation that you would normally anticipate receiving from that. So that's one example well, I guess, and in that case, that might be inside the boundaries of that is in Central District. But there's a couple of other things like that. Another example that comes to mind is the site that we purchased for the original site we purchased for the Pepper Creek storage tank. That's another example that, you know, could be conveyed, could be put back on the market through the local government corporation. So we have some more influence over how it gets developed.
I had the exact same question, so that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But I had a couple of others. Employer ID number,
Mhm.
is the city the employer?
So in your identification number, yes. I mean, for now, so you create the local government corporation as a separate entity. You know, I envision you wouldn't hire any separate employees for that entity at the moment. Hopefully at some point it's wildly successful and you need some employees. But at the moment, yes, it would be city staff
Okay.
kind of working through that.
And the second question was, you used early on in your presentation, the terms disposition and transfer
Mhm.
interchangeably in a sentence. Are they interchangeable?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yeah, they are.
And thirdly, what if the property is in the a property is in a reinvestment zone? Is that viable? Is it can you do that property?
Yes, it's easier to transfer property for economic development purposes when it's already in the reinvestment zone. Because there's a little exception that we've always
Okay.
used. That doesn't mean that property in the reinvestment zone couldn't go into the LGC, but that's not really what we kind of anticipated as the goal.
No,
It's-
I
yeah,
understand, but,
it's-
it doesn't preclude it if the
Right.
need or
Mhm.
desire arose.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. This is kind of another, like I said, it's just another tool in addition to what you already have, including the reinvestment zone. But I think with the LGC, you have even maybe some more options from a kind of disposing of or transferring property than you even do in RZ. So,
But it's also can be used to acquire,
yes.
not
we
just
can buy-
transfer or
mhm,
dispose.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
thank you.
And I did want to, one thing in the community development program, that statute that creates the community development program for acquiring property, it does allow for the use of eminent domain, which is a little bit of a, interesting addition to that program. So just if you read through the community development program document that's in the agenda, you'll see that notation on one of the pages. Obviously, that's not the city's goal, but just want to be straightforward about adopting this program does give the city the ability to use eminent domain for the purposes of promoting the program. Although that's not going to, as with any right-of-way acquisition, that's.
Does that mean it overrides what the legislature passed in terms of eminent domain?
I'll have to check. I mean, they, as far as I know, they haven't made any changes to the chapter that creates the community development program.
So you would still be under that, the legislature's caveats in terms of.
Well, I mean, you're still going to have to follow whatever process they put in place. So any changes that they make from that perspective, you're still going to have to
Okay.
follow that. It just, the way that the statute's worded, if I remember, is, you can use it to promote kind of the program goals under the community development program, but the actual process of acquiring property through eminent domain, you go back to those other statutes. And you
Oh,
follow
okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
So
that
maybe
could-
said another way, to use eminent domain, the property that you're acquiring you have to be acquiring it for a public purpose.
Right.
And chapter 373, which is the community development program that we're recommending, more or less adds additional public purposes that would not exist if you don't have this program in place. So it basically, what you set out as your program goals and activities then become public purposes that then eminent domain can be used to achieve if necessary.
Right. We still
That's
have a
a-
lawyer in training.
Yeah,
so
that's a
not
better
yet.
way to say it.
I like to play lawyer.
Yes.
Past training.
She's very good.
Very good.
Taylor, just one thing, from my understanding on the residential, this would really open up more opportunity for residents to be able to have the infill structures and
Yeah.
developing the neighborhoods.
I think we really hope so. And that's more, going back to the grant programs that Aaron went through, it's a couple of things. I mean, it's great to have those grant programs in place. The education piece is also going to be incredibly important so that homeowners know that it's out there and you can get some applicants. But yeah, I mean, it's, this is just, we're trying to be innovative, right? Of what other tools can we put out there? And even if you just have a few people or a few properties take advantage of those grant programs in the first couple of years, hopefully it will get going, much like CIS. The city's been really successful with the CIS program downtown. And it's maybe time to see if the city can also be successful from a residential perspective in some of these other areas.
But even the local government corporation, one of the questions we get so often is, and Judy, you know this because you send them our way a lot, is like, I see that the city of Temple owns that lot and I want to buy it from you. Well, outside of the local government corporation and outside of a reinvestment zone, we don't have the ability to just say, I will sell this lot to you. We have to go through very specific processes that include, bids or, so this allows us to say, yes, we will be willing to sell this lot to you if you make, put the house on it at, with this
Right.
time frame and you meet our design standards or whatever requirements we want to place on that. So it opens up an opportunity that we don't that's very cumbersome right now to get it directly to a person that you know will develop it in a way that achieves the goals. So this is our solution to that issue.
Yeah, I can see that. I know that especially in East Temple, that for years and years, we've demolished older houses because that's the older part of the city. And there hadn't been a real program that families could possibly go in there and maybe build next to their mother or whatever, because just wasn't that mechanism. So I'm excited about this. Yes.
It will take, I think it will take a lot of education and marketing. And but again, that's why that's one of the pieces of the activities, is to get the word out about what the city's doing.
It also will give an opportunity for economic development in some of these areas that we haven't had.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That's
Because there
awesome.
is some land in, in the, near the, oh gosh, one time on Avenue H. And
Emerson and, we have attractive property on E, and the school district has property that we're visiting with them about, the old Emerson school site. So these are other examples of ways that we can take that property and work directly with a developer or a set of developers to achieve the goals of the plan, which show housing, and investment there.
That will definitely fill a lot of gaps that we haven't had that opportunity. Sounds good.
In terms of economic development, look at what the city of Dallas did with the Omni and the Convention Center and the impact around. Now, that's not providing housing, but it's providing economic development, which provides a tax base. It's changing an area in terms of a very, very positive. Well, I mean, I knew Dallas very well before either of those entities existed.
Right. And we, Temple knows what it takes to get people to come and build, right? And we can see that in the industrial park. And it is infrastructure. That's a huge part of it, but it is also incentives.
Yes.
And so you have to have that mix. And I think that's what, in the reinvestment zone as a tool is perfect for that. But in these other areas outside of the zone, you got to have some other tools. The city's already doing infrastructure, doing Avenue C, and you've got infrastructure projects in some of these areas, but that's not going to get people to come, right? It has to be that mix of infrastructure improvements, incentives, and property. So that's what we're hoping creates that good mix in these other areas as well.
This is really exciting.
So I think it could be fun.
Couple of questions.
Okay.
So with the formation of a local government corporation, and like Ms. Walker was talking about, if ultimately it ends up being adopted across, all of the city, I'm assuming that every city-owned property would then fall into that LGC, and there would be eligible for disposal without all the cumbersome
Right.
regs.
The city will have, you will specifically identify. So it's, you can say, okay, I want a majority of our properties, to be transferred over to the LGC, or you can piecemeal it.
Okay.
You can kind of take it in steps
Okay.
and see how it goes.
Yeah, so there is there's some action that would need to be
Yes.
taken to put properties, you can pick and choose either
Exactly.
specific properties or an area.
Right.
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 So another question is, the financing of the LGC, assuming that property is going to be acquired, the financing would come from the city?
Yes, initially. Yeah. I mean, it's probably always going to need some financing from the city. If you get to a point where you're having success with selling properties and getting some revenue from the sale, you can do, like I said, you can do fundraising too, which is another option. And I mean, think about, different purposes, but the Houston Zoo is owned and operated by an LGC. And so, like I said, the theater districts, I mean, think about the fundraising that those entities do for those areas. And so, it opens up that possibility as well.
So an LGC can acquire properties, it can issue debt, and that debt is not then it doesn't fall onto the city's books, so to speak.
Right.
So obviously, if the city's not paying for it, the LGC has to through fundraising or sale of land,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yes.
Has that ever, I know that's a wide open question, but has that ever been an issue anywhere else with possibly an LGC is not successful? It ends up running up, large amounts of debt,
Sure.
and then at some point has to be, I can see how the Omni or how Traditions or something like that could be self-sustaining.
Yeah.
And that's the hope, right?
Yeah.
But what if it's not?
Yeah.
What
And-
happens then?
And I think, issuing debt is not something that I would foresee the LGC doing for a very long time. And I think that you do have those big LGCs that probably do issue debt, and I'd
Yeah.
have to do some research and kind of dig into their agendas and finances to see. As I've researched this, I haven't come across any horror stories. I'll say that. So there hasn't been anything that's jumped out to me that, something terrible happened and the city got stuck with,
Yeah.
a bunch of debt somehow. But I don't see that being the issuing of debt being something that the organization does
Yeah.
even in the first several years.
And
No, and
Mayor,
I can see that this is a tool for the convenience of ultimately pushing development, even into infill areas, in a way that the city
Right,
prefers.
right.
And
Yeah.
I understand that. One other thing, and Aaron, this may have been in your presentation, was about acquiring land at tax sales or properties. Is
Mhm.
that, it went, I just missed it. Maybe it was answered in your presentation, but would the LGC get preferential treatment at the tax sales, or would they be putting in competitive bids just like any other person that's trying to purchase property at tax sale?
Yeah, so the idea behind it is that the city would enter into a memorandum of understanding with the county and other taxing entities. And before they're placed on the tax sale, the city would have the ability to acquire. those
So
properties.
preferential treatment.
it would be the city though.
It would be the city versus the LGC, and then we could then have the property go to the LGC if we decide to do that.
Transfer then to the LGC.
We could if we decided to,
I
right?
see.
You just want to see which
Yeah.
ones you do. Mhm. Yep.
Good.
But it would be an agreement between the city, as Ms. Meyer stated, and the county and the other entities.
I think that the creation of the LGC, this concept is a great step forward. It reminds me a bit of the formation of the reinvestment zone. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort, but the potential it has to do good things in Temple is phenomenal. And I congratulate the staff for doing the research and bringing it to us. Now the work's going to come on the council and the staff to make sure we put it together right and grow it and mature it over time. And I congratulate you for bringing it.
I do think that's an important point is it is going to take time and resources to get it where it needs to be. But I think this is not foreign to the city of putting in time and resources to promote development and redevelopment. So it's not anything that the city hasn't done. It's just going to be another thing to add to the plate.
Another one of those questions that there may not be an answer to, but one thing that I have been concerned about, especially with the planning districts on the east side, is at some point, the development gets to a point that gentrification may occur. I can see this tool as a way to possibly slow the gentrification of those historic neighborhoods. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, that's such a hard topic, right? And something that we looked at kind of early on in the process because you want to have a mix.
Right.
And I think that is the creation of the community development program and the LGC gives the city the ability to make sure there is a mix, if that makes sense, or really be intentional about creating that mix of housing options in those areas. And so that, because you can, if the city of the LGC has one property that gets developed a certain way, and you've got one next door, you can kind of, you have the ability to say, okay, what would be good here? What keeps people in this neighborhood? What brings people to the neighborhood? And then I think the grant programs, hopefully, for those that are already in those neighborhoods, it provides some additional funding to get work done. Or those that, I actually know a good friend of mine whose parents lived in one of those neighborhoods, and she owns a lot right next door. And you think, how do you get those younger families to come in and incentivize building homes? So I do, that is a hope, and something that we talked about a lot through this process is, we want to have that. We want people who want to be there to stay, and we want people that want to come.
Lots of training and outreach is
Yes.
going to be required into those
Yeah, that's why I go
areas.
back to this, and it seems like this is not a huge piece of that program, but the educational piece of the program is going to be really, really important.
I think
I
for the
really-
general homeowner, I think that those are going to be the outreach to, the person that might qualify for a grant on their own home is getting them comfortable
Yeah.
with that and understanding that.
Right.
Because I think that's really where the difference would happen would be at the sort of the grassroots level, the home and the empty lot next to it and those kinds of things. So it's interesting.
We really do feel like this community development program will help us maintain affordability and the character of the neighborhood, which I think those are two key parts to ensuring that we're not gentrifying while we're introducing new investment, which is critical to the long-term viability and vibrancy of the neighborhoods. We do want to make sure that we keep the affordability, at least have a mix of options, so you've got affordable options alongside others if so that you've got choices, but you also make sure that you're not developing and changing the character of the neighborhood as well. And having some more influence over, how it gets developed really helps with that.
So I think, as you think about the process, I mean, the big question for the LGC of the creation is, we got to pick a name, but also the board. And I'll defer to Brent and Aaron on that, but if we move forward with the proposed schedule for the 16th, there may be some further discussion about the board and how that's structured.
My recommendation for you, at least for us getting started, is that the city council be the board.
When does this adopt? September 19th,
We had on
16th?
the 16th
16th.
as a proposed.
Thanks.
Is there a rush?
Well,
No.
it started in 2012. We certainly haven't rushed. I think it's time.
But you're
Well,
hearing
just
about it
the-
today. and they're
just the
wanting us to
surplus
adopt something,
property.
I mean, and I'm not throwing a wet blanket. It's just,
And I didn't mean to sound quite so snarky. Oh, I didn't totally mean to sound quite so snarky. Just a little bit.
no, that's fine. I'm just pulling your leg a little bit.
Oh, sure,
But,
sure, sure.
I mean, this is big. And this is, the pitfalls that I see is there are some developers that would like to do infill lots. And I've heard requests from multiple developers about when are we going to get access to those lots, right? And so I think it's good that we're now finding a way to move into that space and control that development. But I also see that there will be some possibly some complaints from people that are wanting to pick up. And in my mind, I'm thinking about individual lots. So that maybe I'm not thinking about Jackrabbit over there by, Temple High School. I mean, Jack White. I see that there could possibly be some complaints from the development community and from other people whenever the city is getting preferential treatment on those lots that they would like to be able to develop as they see fit. So, I mean, I see that as a possible fly in the ointment. And I see that as some people could consider that overreach.
And that is a separate, that's not part of the local government corporation. It's a program idea that's listed in the community development plan, but it would still require negotiation with Bell County and the other taxing entities and a separate approval process. And so if that particular strategy is not one you want to pursue, that's not linked per se to the adoption of the community development program or the LGC. It's just one, idea in a list of, I don't know, 50, 100 different initiatives. So if that's something you're not comfortable with, you wouldn't necessarily have to pursue that.
I mean, I just think that has to be considered because, again, people have been wanting access to those lots.
Are you talking about the tax foreclosure lots or more globally, the lots that? the
I'm
city
talking about
has?
the city having preferential treatment on the tax foreclosure lots.
Okay,
Because I know, people, that's a way to pick up a lot
Yeah.
for those that develop. And then maybe on the, for lack of a better way to say it, on the lower end, maybe just getting into the development process, that's a way to pick up a lot affordably and build hopefully an affordable structure that can be sold or rented or whatever. And now they, I mean, I think it could be viewed as, possibly Big Brother coming in and just sweeping the table.
I do understand the concern. Waco has had a similar process in place for a long time. And I talked with their city attorney last year when we were working on this. And she said that the process has worked very well for them. They were in the middle of implementing some changes to it. And I need to go back to her to see if they did and what they ended up doing. But at least from her perspective, she thought the program was filling a gap. It's not the main thing that the city was relying upon, but it gave them another option to get properties. And I think, just overall, I think you have to do something. And so while I understand that concern, the other option is to not do anything. And then you have less control over what happens in an area where the city is investing a substantial amount of money.
And I think that, again, I'm not arguing, I'm
Yeah.
playing devil's advocate
Oh, sure. Yeah.
in all respects.
Oh, yes.
I think that some would also view this as the city picking winners and losers. Whenever a piece of property goes into the LGC, and then the city can then control who then has access to develop that LGC. I'm sorry, that piece of property in the LGC.
Yeah, but you're tying it to these program goals, and I'll say from an economic development standpoint, cities already do that. They're already picking and choosing, and that's how you get jobs and you get tax revenue to come in to promote those goals. But if we're looking just at our neighborhood planning districts, you're going to tie it back to those goals. And I think that you can, as you all make decisions about where properties go, even the simple step of saying this promotes X goal of the community development program, being very specific about tying it back to the program, I think helps tell the story of what you're doing and why. So it's new and it's different, and I completely understand the concerns. And I think that you work through them as they come up.
Your presentation, I think you excuse me, made reference to building appearance, so to speak, within neighborhood infill, looking like similar. You phrased it much better than I'm trying to, but that was in your presentation, wasn't it?
Yes.
Control of that.
Yes.
Does the LGC, would that give us more strength in terms of that part of the goal?
Having the LGC.
Yes, would having an LGC help strengthen that?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. So you
Good.
have, I think, two ways, you have the grants. So if you are afforded a grant, you, the way that we put those together is we related those to the neighborhood planning districts and those documents. And so, those grants really match the character of each of those neighborhoods. And then if you have the LGC, when you convey property, you can include parameters associated with the development or redevelopment of that property, which could, be the look, whether it's single family attached or detached, or,
Right.
the type of residential or commercial development that's in there, as well as the affordability as well.
Well, we certainly want to address the affordability in terms of keeping neighborhood character, but we also, from my perspective, really, really, really want to address and stay on target with the appearance, fitting the neighborhood
Right.
character. And you
Matching
did
the
that
character.
in Belton so well, over by the park. And I know that you'll do the same thing again.
And what was there was legislation, I think we did 19 about building materials.
Yes.
And that's still in place, I believe. And so interestingly, I'll go back and look, but at least when that legislation was adopted, a caveat to it was that you could require certain building materials and other things through an agreement under Chapter 373. So this program, so it gives you back that opportunity to put in some of the requirements that you got taken away a couple years ago. So-
Right, so we would override that part of the legislative, oh, very
Yeah.
good.
And I'll go back and check for sure, but I remember that was one of those interesting kind of exceptions that they put into the legislation, unless they have messed it up again.
Give them time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Procedural question. If item 8 is approved, then there'll be a sure I'm understanding here. So on item 8 is consider adopting a resolution to schedule a public hearing on the community development program. Does that include the LGC?
No, and
Okay.
I should, that's an important point that I think we didn't make. You can adopt the community development program and not do the LGC. They're not required to be done together. We're just proposing the LGC as a tool to implement some of these activities in the community development program.
And that would require a separate approval later
Right,
to
so-
attach this to the community program.
Yeah, so the way we set it up was you do have to have this public hearing for the community development program. So that's what would happen next week, no action. And then the community development program has to be adopted by ordinance. And so at the first September meeting, you would do the first reading of the program. And then at the second, that September 16th meeting, you would do the second reading of the program. And then if you wanted to move forward with the LGC, another resolution creating the LGC. So you have
Which
two,
we could do on the 16th of September if we chose.
if you chose to. Yeah.
Got it.
And none of that creates the MOU with Bell County.
Yeah.
That would be another separate action in the future.
And that would take some, negotiation and
Sure.
discussions with them.
Council, any more questions?
No, but I'm really excited about the possibility. Because, you're looking at developers and they're doing a great job all over the city, but I don't see them paying a lot of attention on individual lots in certain areas anyway. So I think, but for the neighbors and for the families that would like to do that, this would really give them an opportunity to move back into their neighborhoods that they grew up in.
Thank y'all very much. Moving on to item 8 is to consider adopting a resolution scheduling a public hearing on the proposed community development program for August 19th, 2021 at 5 p.m.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion on item 8 by Councilmember Walker. We have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Morales. Council, if you would, please cast your vote.
Aye.
Item 8 passes 5 votes to 0. Thank you all very much for attending tonight's meeting and today's meeting, and this meeting is adjourned.